Om Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudidayet Nashtaprayeshva Padreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Continuing the Srimad Bhagavatam in Prahlad's prayers, Canto 7, Chapter 9, we're on verse 19. 7, 9, 19. Balasya neha sharanam pataro nrusangha natasya chagadam udam vati manchito now. Taptasya tat pratibhatiri ahanja seshtastavad vipo tanu pratang todapekshitana. Famous verse. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. My Lord Nrsingadeva, O Supreme, because of a bodily conception of life, embodied souls, neglected and not cared for by you, cannot do anything for their betterment. Whatever remedies they accept, although perhaps temporarily beneficial, are certainly impermanent. For example, a father and mother cannot protect their child. A physician in medicine cannot relieve a suffering patient. And a boat on the ocean cannot protect a drowning man. Purport. Through parental care, through remedies for different kinds of disease, and through means of protection on the water, in the air, and on land, there is always an endeavor for relief from various kinds of suffering in the material world. But none of them are guaranteed measures for protection. They may be beneficial temporarily, but they afford no permanent benefit. Despite the presence of a father and mother, a child cannot be protected from accidental death, disease, and various other miseries. No one can help, including the parents. Ultimately, the shelter is the Lord, and the one who takes shelter of the Lord is protected. This is guaranteed. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhaktav pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declare boldly that my devotee never perishes. Therefore, unless one is protected by the mercy of the Lord, no remedial measure can act effectively. One should consequently depend fully on the causeless mercy of the Lord. Although as a matter of routine duty, one must, of course, accept other remedial measures, no one can protect one who is neglected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this material world, everyone is trying to counteract the onslaught of material nature, but everyone is ultimately fully controlled by material nature. Therefore, even though so-called philosophers and scientists try to surmount the onslaught of material nature, they have not been able to do so. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 13:9 that the real sufferings of the material world are four. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Birth, death, old age, and disease. In the history of the world, no one has been successful in conquering these miseries imposed by material nature. How many people?
No one. Zero.
But a couple people, right? No one has been successful in conquering these miseries imposed by material nature. Prakriti kriyamanani gunah karmani sarvashaha. Nature, Prakriti, is so strong that no one can overcome stringent laws. So-called scientists, philosophers, religionists, and politicians should therefore conclude that they cannot offer facilities to the people in general. They should make vigorous propaganda to awaken the populace and raise them to the platform of Krishna consciousness. Our humble attempt to propagate the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world is the only remedy that can bring about a peaceful and happy life. We can never be happy without the mercy of the Supreme Lord. If we keep displeasing our Supreme Father, we shall never be happy within this material world in either the upper or lower planetary systems. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shirakaya Chakrurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshasarane Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Sandhupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So, a lot here. I think it's important to bring out the context of what Prahlad has just said. 2 verses ago, he points out that because of being in this world and having some attachment to pleasing circumstances, we have a regrettable situation, he says, because we're coming into and out of combination with pleasing and displeasing circumstances. We take up some remedies, but those remedies are more miserable than the miseries themselves, and I think the only solution is to be engaged in your service. And so, the next verse, the previous verse, he said, by associating with devotees, chanting your glories, and following their instructions in disciplined succession, I can cross over this ocean of suffering, right? Ocean of suffering is what he says previous to that, the coming into contact with pleasing and displeasing circumstances and coming out of it. That's always happening. Because of that, he says in this verse, anybody who doesn't do this, anybody who is not cared for by you, who isn't under your shelter, they can't actually provide the protection they're looking for independently, right? This world is a place where there's suffering, and then there's a pause, and there's some material happiness, and there's a pause, and none of it lasts, and all of it's coming and going. And it's a problem. It's fundamentally a problem. And somebody who's a self-realized soul understands that and isn't trying to play that game and win it. They're also not trying to, winning means basically coming up with some independent solution, which is what Prabhupada addresses in the purport. There is no independent solution. How does he put it? So-called scientists, philosophers, religionists, and politicians should therefore conclude that they cannot offer facilities to the people in general. There is an unspoken assumption behind the work that we do in the material world, which is that it can solve the existential problem, including birth, death, old age, and disease. And of course it cannot, as long as it's independently driven. There is no possibility of doing that. That's what this verse is about. Bala Sineha Sharanam Pitaro Nrsimha. Famous verse because Prahlad, although he's only a child, he recognizes the futility of acting independently from Krishna, which is something you can express in a sentence like that, but it's actually incredibly deep, because otherwise everyone is always acting independently of Krishna. That's the basis of material life. So that's why his verse sounds so strange when you first hear it. It's like, wait a minute, parents can't protect their children? You can go to medical school for all these years, but it's actually useless? It's not that it's useless exactly. It's that it's not sufficient. It may be necessary, but it's not sufficient. Human society requires loving parents, and there's ample evidence for Krishna having arranged human society in such a way that is very supported and indeed rewarded. You take responsibility, you get in Krishna's good books. You don't take responsibility, you act irresponsibly, not so good. However, it's not sufficient to solve the problems of life, right? If it were, then a good set of parents would guarantee eternal happiness, and that's simply not the case. It's just a foundation for even just getting off the ground, right? So Prahlad is very wisely aware of our existential situation, that we rely on, and indeed we have to rely on, so many different kinds of methods to get by in the world. And still it's not enough. The materialistic mentality tries to avoid, in a really degraded situation, it tries to avoid even addressing the fact that we're materially dependent, right? It doesn't want to remember how dependent it was on its parents. It doesn't want to remember that it wouldn't be anywhere without its teachers, its guides. It wouldn't be anywhere without everything. Like, we can't even breathe without help. In fact, technically, we're not even really breathing. We're being breathed, because generally we don't even think about breathing. We have this little machine going on and it does the breathing for us, and we only notice if there's a problem, and it's like extremely urgent. If I don't breathe by the end of this sentence, it's all over for me. That the really gross materialist doesn't even want to address their basic material dependence. A more polished materialist is actually grateful. Like, no, I'm grateful for all these things that are being provided. And still I want to use all of that to try to create a solution for the problems that I see for my sense gratification. I want uninterrupted sense gratification. I want my senses, gross and subtle, means of the gross body and of the material mind and intelligence, to be getting what they want without interruption and not getting what they don't want, always. That's Hiranyakashipu's plan, right? He's just an emblem of that, but taken to the nth degree. You know, he did it more successfully than any of us can ever dream of doing. And still it was not enough. In fact, in this section before these prayers, before Hiranyakashipu's sending his son Prahlad to try to get indoctrinated by his own demoniac peers, the rise to power of Hiranyakashipu is described, and it's described there that his anxiety was immeasurable because he was fighting constantly to try to be Krishna. He was fighting constantly to try to control that which can never be controlled by him. It was just slipping through his hands at every moment. Mm-hmm. The only difference between him and every other materialist was that he was more hell-bent. He was more powerful, he was more self-assured, he was more stubborn. That's all. And therefore he was more anxious. It's actually an anxiety-ridden situation. So Prahlad, in full ecstasy of love, by the way, this statement is not offered in anxiety. It's offered in love and full bliss. He's saying, actually, Krishna, this is why I want to take shelter of your devotees. This is why I want to take shelter of the practice of bhakti and of devotional service to you. Because even those who are assigned to be protectors cannot do it perfectly. Only you can. It's not that they can, and it's not that nobody can. That's another fallacy. Sometimes after frustration, one comes to the conclusion, well, I was let down here, I was let down there. I also can't be perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's in control. It's all random. It's all chaos, right? Nihilism. Prahlad is not so ignorant. He knows he's not in control. He knows his father is not in control. Nobody's in control except for Krishna, who actually is in perfect control. And so he's joyfully accepting that surrender. And so the practical application of this verse is very deep. That, as Prabhupada says, as a matter of routine duty, one must, of course, perform their duties in relation to protection, in relation to the material world. That doesn't change. One should not read this verse and think, therefore, we have to reject all form of authority. No, that's not the point. The point is a shift in mentality. It's actually extremely subtle. It's a shift in ego, right? Who am I? The incorrect ego is, I am someone who can solve these problems. I am someone who can find a solution. Either make it myself or research how someone else has found a solution for birth, death, old age, and disease. Find a solution for this world that keeps thwarting my desires for whatever it is I want. That's not right. You're not that person. No one is that person. Except for Krishna. He's independent. And the correct conception is, whatever's happening, whatever my duties are in this moment, and whatever's happening to me is actually happening for me, and I have to do what I have to do in terms of my duties in the world. That's true, but that's also service. I have to do it to the best of my ability, and the result is not up to me. It's not. It's up to Krishna. Whether it's my service or it's someone else's service somewhere. It's not. The results are not up to me. They're up to Krishna. And that's where my ultimate shelter is. Even though I may be giving shelter, even though I may be receiving shelter, I know that ultimately, at the end, Krishna is the real shelter. And this is even there in the Ayurvedic Shastra. This is a principle even in Ayurveda. Ayurveda also has its literature. And in Ayurveda, it says, Aushya Chintayat Vishnu. Aushadhi Chintayat Vishnu means when you take medicine, in Ayurveda, you assess how the body is out of balance with its natural balance point, and what are the environmental and dietary factors, and you may take some remedies, herbal remedies, different kinds of things, food, you'll change your diet to put that in balance, and that's all very good. In fact, the Ayurvedic knowledge came from Dhanvantari, who's an incarnation of Krishna. But that's the point. Aushya Chintayat Vishnu. When you take your medicine, you should chintayat, you should remember Vishnu. That's what they say. Why? Because it comes from Dhanvantari. He's the source of all medicine anyway. There would be no doctors, Ayurvedic or allopathic or otherwise, without Krishna's help. Where would he get these intelligent brains to create the ability to either manufacture a form of medicine or receive that which is coming down from Krishna in one way or another, manipulate it and try to administer it? It's all coming from Krishna, Prabhupada jokes, the great scientists and philosophers and thinkers who think that they're independent from the Supreme come up with so many ideas about how the universe works, how to solve the problems, but nobody asks the question, who created your brilliant mind that is solving these problems, right? Are you able to create that yourself? Can you manufacture such proud intelligence? No, we cannot. All of our posturing and saber rattling about AI otherwise, notwithstanding, it's a failure and will continue to be a failure in reproducing independent thought. That's Krishna's domain. You cannot create consciousness. So the attempt to actually solve any problem with the aid of our consciousness or any other external tools are just another form of taking shelter of Krishna. And therefore, aushadhi chintayet Vishnum. Whenever you take your medicine or whenever you offer medicine, you should remember who is the real doctor, right? And it's not us. Whether we may be in that role or we're in the receiving role, whether we're a patient. You still have to do your duty, but do it as a servant. Be a servant leader. Be a servant teacher. Be a servant parent. Be a servant doctor. Be a servant shoe salesman. It doesn't matter what your position is. They can all be equally egotistical in the form of I'm in control or in the form of real ego. Krishna's in control. And then you take your authority and your sphere of influence and you do it humbly, just like Arjuna did. Arjuna was the most qualified warrior. A large part of the Mahabharata before the Bhagavad Gita is there to show just how amazingly powerful Arjuna was. He dueled Shiva and won. He went to the heavenly planets. He was invited. He was so celebrated that he went to Indraloka and dined and feasted there. He received the benediction of the Maya demon. He received the benediction of this demigod, that demigod. He was basically armed to the teeth, physically, and also in terms of his training, and also in terms of mantra. We heard in the first canto how Ashwatthama tries to kill the Pandavas with mantra. Who counteracts it? Arjuna does. He's trained. He's like a wizard, practically. He's using mantras. He's got weapons. Some of them are visible, some are invisible. Some of them use elemental powers. I mean, it's like everything that, a wizard or a Star Wars Jedi wants to be. He's like the greatest, most powerful warrior. And he's incredibly brave, incredibly strong, right? Who won Draupadi's hand? Arjuna. And after all that, he can't solve the problems on the battlefield of Bhagavad Gita. But after he hears from Krishna, he does what he has to do, And he does it incredibly well. But he does it all in the humble mood of service, okay? Now I understand whatever is going to happen is going to happen. In fact, in chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna already says, I've already put to death everyone who's supposed to die in this battlefield. That's already happened. All you have to do, nimittamatram bhava savyasachin. Savyasachi, which is a name for Arjuna, which if I recall correctly means somebody who can actually wield a bow and arrow two-sided. Normally, you can only have one side, but he's so good he can reverse it and shoot left-handed. Like you have full field of vision. He's praising his prowess and he's saying, but actually just be an instrument. Nimittamatram, just be an instrument to my will. Submit to that because they're already going to die. Whoever's going to live is already going to live. That's not your job. Your job is to be my servant here. That's what I want from you. He said when he showed his universal form, right? So Arjuna does that. No problem. Humble, simple service. And of course, it's an unbelievable victory, right? He's untouched. So many die. However, the whole time, humble service. So that's Prahlad's mood. Do whatever you have to do, but just realize you're being empowered one way or another. And, we talked a little bit about the gross materialist who tries to pretend they're completely independent. And the more polished materialist who doesn't do that, they're grateful for what's coming to them, but they still desperately try to control what's not theirs to control. A little more polished than that is somebody who, in their endeavors, maybe they're attached to acting a certain way, but they realize that those gifts are actually being given, right? And we can see that in more pious craftspersons, artists, artisans, musicians, who are aware that I didn't come up with this. Mm-hmm. I didn't create this. I'm grateful that it's coming through me, and I know that it can be taken away because I didn't create it. And if they're asked, like, how did you compose that song? It was inspired, and they have some sense of gratitude and piety. And that's a practical demonstration of this very principle. They don't stop making their music. They just make it as service. In fact, as I'm fond of pointing out, Isaac Newton famous scientist. He was a devout Christian. He retired from the field of science very young to just spend the rest of his life composing prayers of adulation for the Lord. Because he felt that the scientific endeavor was just another way for him to point out how great God was anyway. And he felt he had done what he needed to do and just went back to, a simple Christian life. So for him, all the science that he was doing was just another form of prayer. It's like, wow, look how great God is. That he's in control in this way and that way. And this is the way that from our little temporary, minimally small vantage point, we can actually see like what he's actually doing to run this universe. It was just another form of service. So that's what Prahlad's saying. With deep wisdom, he's pointing out that effectively, my father, who was the greatest, most successful advocate of trying to be independent, failed. And it's always going to be a failure because the reason for his failure is he didn't take shelter of you. This is his logic he's using for his previous verses, that I need to be engaged in service. I need the help of the devotees to do that. And I want to be always acting in that way because I can't. And no one has ever successfully managed the material situation otherwise. Om Tat Sat. Let's take some comments, questions, or reflections on this principle. Rather revolutionary. I've heard this verse discussed, and every time it's discussed, generally the discussion always turns to, well, what does it mean for me? Like, should I? Am I supposed to like not? How am I supposed to engage in the world, right? Knowing that actually no one's in control but Krishna. So we'll see if that happens again.
Thank you for class, Shamya. I love this teaching around when you take your medicine, remember who the real doctor is, remember where it's coming from, and whether that's literally if I get sick and I go to the doctor and I'm taking medicine, right? Or I'm going through a challenge, right? And like that's happening through Krishna, or I find myself in great success, or I'm getting appreciations from someone, or I'm being humbled by someone and being given correction, right? All of that is coming from Krishna, right? All of the skills and gifts that I have that I'm sharing with others, all of the faults that I have, like all of it, right? It's like it's not random, it's not under my control or my guise, right? And to be able to remember that, like truly remember that moment to moment, that remembering is such medicine in itself, and is like that comes more and more. I'm realizing that remembrance comes more and more and more through steady sadhana, right? Through hearing these verses and reading these texts in community, being in community. Otherwise, it's much easier to forget.
Yeah, there's a strong pull that way, which Prahlad will address in some other prayers coming up, which is effectively that you can't stand still. If you try to stand still, you're going backwards, because the material nature has her influence. And standing still means I don't need to chant today. I've already figured it out, or I'm okay. I don't need to practice. I don't need to going forward, or I'm okay right now. No, we're actually not in this world. There's a churning effect. It's like a riptide. If you just decide to kind of float in a riptide, you're gone. You're gone. You have to deal with it properly, right? You have to address it. The materialist is trying to deal with it, but they're dealing with it ineffectively, and the ineffective nature of their attempt is foundational. If you try to solve a long math equation, but in the first couple of seconds of your hour-long calculation you make a mistake, everything afterwards is useless.
Right.
It's just mental exercise what you've been doing after that, because your beginning state, like your axiom, is wrong, right? There's this phenomenon of recognizing, oh wow, as we advance, we recognize, oh wow, I really do need to chant. I'm really grateful for this, because that's what's establishing remembrance, not just during the practice, chanting or reading or associating, but increasingly, in my life,
Right.
maybe I cannot. It's not possible for me to chant literally all the time, but Vishwanath says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya always means at least daily. And I'm realizing, wow, if I don't do that, like I just feel riptide is getting me and I'm not doing anything about it. Yeah.
And in these spaces that we have in our Sangha and in other Sanghas, right, to reflect on like this part of even class I find so important in our Shastra class and in T&T Lock, in different ways of like reflecting and through contemplating what we're hearing and how to apply it to our own lives and then bring it into how we're navigating the world and living in our bhakti. It's so important. So
it's very important. And in the I don't know what the texts are. They may be Nyaya or logic texts or Upanishads, but it's described first is Shravana, you hear, then is Manana, you think about, then is Nididhyasana, which means you contemplate the application of it, right? Of anything. This can work for anything. And then you start teaching about it when you've achieved some mastery. But there's this relationship between you hear, you think about it, get purified by it, and then you're like, well, what does this mean for me, right? And that's those little sanghas, whether it's one-on-one or smaller sanghas where there's trust and love, and you can open your heart about the same principles we're learning about, but how it applies to you in your situation or what you're learning or what you're sitting with, where your challenges are, is incredibly fortifying, and it's necessary. It deeply accelerates one's advancement in bhakti, because that application, like, imagine what it takes for Prahlad at 5 years old, having just witnessed his father get eviscerated in front of him, to have this deep realization with no pause, such that demigods on the level of Brahma and Shiva are like, yeah, you got to take a lead here. You know what's up more than we do, right? That's actually possible. Anybody can get to that through bhakti. But, for us as conditioned souls, not the Prahlad Maharaj of the universe, that support of small, loving, intimate exchanges, revealing of the heart, that's what lets us internalize these lessons, powerful ways. At least it accelerates that process for sure.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more reflections or questions or comments?
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you for a great class. Just the whole notion of not you being independent is a failure. It's going to be a failure. There's a couple different things I want to say. First, I'm reading the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and when we were talking about this, I was thinking about how Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Gandhi trying to say, stop being in politics, stop all that, and really, you can't do this independently. You're getting older. Like, before something inglorious happens to you, come take shelter. Take shelter and read the Gita and just surrender to what's really important, right? Surrender to Krishna and all this. And, it was such a powerful chapter, especially since Gandhi actually died a month later. And when I thought about it, I was like, here's Prabhupada, like, yes, he was raised in a family like his father, he was raised with bhakti and everything, but he certainly had all his challenges all along the way. Met his guru, wanted to do the right thing, but was struggling, between the material world and independence and having the money to do the right thing, and back and forth like we all do. And, he's so impassioned that he writes like the biggest political situation going on in front of him, and he writes to Gandhi to try to plead to him, please understand that you can't be independent. And, I don't know, I felt that was so very touching. And the second thing that I thought about, with more personal level, was,
the first thing first, if I may, just
yeah, go ahead. Of course,
that was
of course.
Really powerful. Imagine the boldness of Prabhupada doing that, right?
Right.
Right. Whether he reads it or not, I gotta try. Powerful. So the tragedy of that situation was that Gandhi was killed by a Hindu who was dissatisfied with how he was managing. And Prabhupada brings this up, is that no matter how hard you try in the material world, even to be of service, you're going to let down some people, right? You cannot take Krishna's place. You can't perfectly serve them. Somebody was so dissatisfied they shot and killed him. We can take some solace in the fact that of note is his last words when he was shot. Hey Ram, oh Rama.
Mhm.
So apparently he had imbibed enough from his culture of remembrance that when it was actually time to leave his body, he did so by taking the name of the Lord and remembering that we're all dependent. But yeah, very very poignant. And probably that well taken, that point that the acharyas in our line are so bold and so compassionate, as Prahlad is, being ushered in front of Lord Nrsingadev. He knows his duty, even though his position is very, very humble. It's like, here's the truth. Prahlad did that with his schoolmates too. He was preaching during recess. It's like, while his demoniac teachers are trying to organize like a materialistic school, here he's here showing pure bhakti to his classmates. It's just hallmark of pure devotees. Yeah. And your next point, please.
Well, let me just comment back to you. I did not know the motive of the assassin, so thank you
Yeah.
for enlightening me on that. Because if it was in the Leela Amrita, I missed that part. But that is really wild. The other thing is kind of just a, I don't know, corporate conundrum, right? So there's truth in the fact that you can't succeed, independently. And so I have this like constant conundrum of, I want to be detached from the results. I want to do a good job and be detached from the results. Yet it's annual appraisal season, and I have all my bosses that were my champions before are gone, right? So
Mm.
now I have this like almost guilt that I have to write my self-assessment in a way that proves that I'm worthy of, whatever. So it's this like dichotomy between, I'm not independent in that process either. If I'm completely humble, like it seems like on face the scripture's telling us to be, then I will be passed over. And I think that's something that, especially in women in corporate America, like if we don't advocate for ourselves, then we're passed over.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting irony, given all the bhakti, humility, and detachment from results that we need to embody for our eternal souls. But in the material life right now, I need to educate my boss what I've been doing for the last year, so I continue to be on the path, in my career that is appropriate for my effort. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I do. I very much do. It's an internal realization, and you can take shelter um, in the example of devotees like Arjuna or Bhishma or Bhima or Hanuman, where their external duty is one of you know crushing opposition through martial power, right? Um, yeah, like the corporate culture is uh, a twisted kind of masculine culture. You
Yeah.
know,
Hmm?
it's not.
Oh, I know.
It's not even like a functional masculine culture. It's just like a shadow of masculine culture. It's just very. And your point is well taken that everybody, especially women, really have to go out of their way to advocate for themselves because no one's going to protect them. No one's going to stand up for you. You really are rewarded for being independently thinking and if you're a grifter, a con man or con woman, and you're good enough at it, you get rewarded. And we have examples of that, um, countless examples actually. Um, so while you're in that world, develop a healthy detachment by noticing its hypocrisy and its dysfunctionality. But if you're choosing for your service to remain in that world temporarily, then because everything's temporary, then do what you have to do. Arjuna, there was a period of time where he was the most qualified warrior on the planet, and then that period of time passed when Krishna left, and he lost all of his powers. But he could only deal with that in the having and the not having by being Krishna conscious, right? So he humbly crushed the opposition on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. There was no politeness. Like the time for establishing whether it was right or not to fight had already passed. He knew that he was doing the right thing, materially and spiritually. There was no apologies. It was just the very nitty gritty of, okay, now this person has to die over there, and that person has to die after that. It was just, that's what he had to do. That's the nature of his service. So if the nature of your service is being like a corporate, whatever they need you to be, then you do that. But you can still do it as a servant. And we know that he did it as a servant because his consciousness was peaceful in doing it, right? And then when that power was taken away, it was like, you don't need that. We don't need that anymore from you, Arjuna. Then he was able to tolerate that by remembering what Krishna had shared with him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, that I'm just a servant. I was a servant before, and I'm a servant now. So, you're not the first and not the last devotee to have to live in such a crazy culture. In one way or another, all of us who are not living on a mountain are beholden to the reckless and dysfunctional decisions of the culture around us, and it's a hallmark of our line to be aware of the fallacies of those things. And it's good to notice that, because it can also help you when the time comes to disengage. It's like, okay, good, I can divest myself of this now, and you become like, more like a teacher. You can actually point out, well, I was in that situation that you're in, and I understand, and you can share from your realization of what you did and how you did it. It's profoundly, it's not nourishing, especially for someone who has a materially feminine psyche. It's not nourishing being in that kind of culture. It's very degrading. It really forces you to be hyper masculine, and I would make the case it's even degrading for those who have a masculine nature, because it's just so twisted. It doesn't. A real masculine nature would be, self-promoting and independent to a degree, but that's rooted in a sense of service, and corporate culture really isn't. It's rooted in a sense of greed, personal attention, personal care. But nothing wrong with little self-promotion. Prabhupada self-promoted.
Sure, yeah.
He wrote flyers. In fact, he wrote a flyer in India. You'll get this in the Lilamrita. Srimad Bhagavatam, something like, he said 100 volumes, 2 volumes and 98 more on the way or something. Like, he promised so much. He was always promoting that he's promoting this in this purport. This will solve the problems of life. Like, it's incredibly bold. He writes Gandhi and says, you know what? I got your solutions right here, Mahatma. Here it is. Like, you can do that. But just do it while you take the pill internally. Like, yeah, but Krishna, we know, although I'm doing a good job at work and I have to now raise my voice and advocate for myself, we know that whatever I'm doing is really because of you. And try not to lie too much. But you don't have to, because you're very good at what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Any other reflections? All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Prahlad Maharaj ki jai. Now let's offer our respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, full of compassion and can fulfill the desires of everyone. Jai. Vancha kalpa tarupyascha, kripa sindhu pya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Namo namaha. Anantapoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.